Cool. Right. Well, the record button's gone, so I guess we'll find out whether this is working or not soon. Um, uh, right. Well, welcome back to the session. Welcome back to the Undying Lands. Um, we are currently in the top of the tower still, and you guys have just spoken to Aria the Silver of Seraphina, as she pronounces it, and she has, which is, by the way, I thought I'd put in that as a little very meta thing that I'd just like make it a different pronunciation than I'd already been pronouncing it because I thought that was a nice little cool detail. Anyway, never mind. Just thinking my own phrases.
I'm just gonna ask about Foundry. It's a layout. I just see our icons here, but I guess it's
Yeah.
more than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's basically the battle map. It's like a top-down view of the world that you're in, and you control your icon and move it around. And each
Okay.
character's tokens, they each have. I decide the ownership, so which person logs in determines which tokens you can control and you can see the world from. So you get your own
Okay.
perspective and nobody else's. I'm the person that
Then
can
I'm
see
probably
everybody's,
gonna
but not.
then I'm probably gonna go on Discord on the phone and switch because I just see our icons on the phone.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, you can
Yeah.
switch if you want. Today's going
Yep.
to be a different sort of a way of doing things. Today's going to be more theatre of the mind than it is on a map because there's not really a lot to do on the map today. And there will be
Yay, no
roles.
bumping into walls.
Yeah. there will be roles, but I'll prompt you for those when they come, and there'll be less. There'll be less help action. You won't necessarily be able to give help actions, which will become apparent as we go through it. So yeah, we're here. We're done. We're ready. Are you got it all sorted, Fabius?
Yep.
We can't see your camera, but I guess that's not an issue.
No, because my phone couldn't handle having the camera and all of you on.
That is totally fine. So, you've just spoken to Aria, who gave your map to the region, told you that Hestia True Strike is in the museum district, and suggested heavily that you go and see her to talk to her about things that you're clearly unaware of. What do you want to do?
I suggest that, given what we've done so far, I think we should listen to her. I don't think it's a bad idea to, go somewhere where someone who actually knows these people has told us to go.
Sounds like a smart decision.
Yeah.
I agree, says Iris. Iris, who's not really been in the party for long enough to make these decisions, but fully agrees. We'll go along with what Icarus says anyway, no matter what. Okay, so we're going to skip forward in time. We're not going to go through the whole encounter thing where you go through the vines because that's honestly it's getting a little old on me now. So we're going to skip that just for the sake of time because we've got a chunky one today.
I rolled through that so well. I rolled 20s every single time.
Yeah, you did. Yeah. Icarus just flew through it. Icarus just like carving away with their rapier. Yeah, Fabius is a squirrel, so very knowledgeable with vines, able to get through them easily. Iris just a massive spear and a tiny person, so easily just went through that. Harrion, of course, shut himself. Because Harrion likes to do that. Also, I discussed with David beforehand. We agreed that he would roll his final check on the shapeshifter curse on his next session because he wanted to be able to do it himself rather than me do it. I thought I'd reach out and offer it to him because it's an important role. Right, so we move now to a different district. This is now the museum district. You notice that the area surrounding this enormous marble building is clear of vines, actually. It doesn't clear when you get near it. It's just empty. It looks like there's the sort of scraps of greenery on the ground. It looks like someone's been going at it, really trying to clear this area, and they've done a good job. There's still the remnants of some bits left over, but it's not connected to the rest. So you get a sense that this sort of hive mind thing will not come into play here. What you see from the outset is you see a sort of a tall, stepped, sort of what would you call this? Like a raised section at the front of the building with a statue in the middle of it, and the signage over the top, which you can't see on the map, says the Museum of Life. And it's still dark out. The moon is still high in the sky, and it essentially is a place that is devoid of all life. There's nobody around. There's no zombies around. There's no vines around. What do you want to do?
How ironic.
I know, right?
I guess step towards wherever the actual entrance is.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you can see that the entrance is just an enormous open archway. This is obviously a building from ancient times, as all of the buildings here are. And the ancient sort of architecture is not one of doors because there were fewer people, but they were just of an elevated standpoint, sort of, they were wise beyond their years more than they were intellectual beings. So they didn't really see the point of having doors, especially to a public building anyway. So this sort of a building would never have been closed off. You sort of get the sense of that just by looking at it. It's kind of one of those public structures. Iris is already delighted and starts walking off in the direction of the door. There are enormous marble pillars.
It was so tiny.
There are enormous marble pillars. It's just big stone bricks that the whole thing is made of. The building itself is largely untouched by the falling crap of everywhere else. When the spine fell. But as you near the sort of reception desk sort of thing, you do see off to the far left a familiar looking person. You see a Goliath redhead in beautiful armor with all this knurling that she's wearing, and she's surrounded by 4 other people. She stands holding on to an axe. And if you get closer, I will describe the scene to you.
Let's go.
So cool.
So as you get closer, you start to hear sort of the muffled voices turn into clearer voices. There's an echo of it through this whole big building here, and the idea that what you see here is you see Hestia Truestrike. She stands with her axe as she's slowly and carefully sharpening off the blade. She looks like she's not really paying attention to much around her. She looks like she's sort of pensive, not focusing on the task. Almost like she's, part going through the motions, part muscle memory. She's done this so much. She's a very renowned and very accomplished blacksmith, and you know that about her. The other 4 people that stand near her are a young, slender, dark-haired woman wearing a red cloak. Looks shy and confined, off to one side. You see people preparing rituals. One person who has grey, silvery kind of hair with grey eyes and a beautiful visage, but stoic and hard in its appearance, wearing scale mail. Who is sort of preparing this rite, this ritual. She seems a little bit less hardened than you just saw. You see forgetting the names. Let me just have a quick look back. Blah, 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 blah. I've got so many notes. You see a dragonborn wizard in long robes, holding onto a china teacup, just carefully sipping it, sort of as he gazes down at his sort of spell book, this enormous leather-bound tome that's full of etchings and carvings and what seems impossible in parchment, but he's managed to do it because he's clearly accomplished. And you see a cleric, a wizened cleric, who looks sort of grave in their aspect, who is obviously focused on something other than the task at hand, but definitely has his focus on something. And the 5 of them are just sort of quietly getting on with what they're doing. They all look younger than the versions of them that you have met before, and you obviously recognize all 5 of them as the Faragungara. Do you think it will go off well tomorrow? I do not know. I have thought on this for much time. Much has been occupying my thoughts, and all I can think of is tomorrow and what it will bring. I do not know if we will live through this. I know, though, that we must. You see Arya speak up, following Kale's example. Yes, I believe that this is something that we must think on, but we must think on it in a positive way. If we allow these fears to consume our thoughts, then those we speak with tomorrow will only see it. Hestia speaks up. By those tomorrow, you mean... Gravar steps in. The gods that we speak with. Yes. We need to acknowledge that the gods are what they are. They are gods, and we are mortals. And it would do us a great service if we were to acknowledge that immediately and hide all pretense to the contrary. You see all of them hear those words and they all sort of bow their heads. And one of them pipes up, I've made some food. Shall we dine? And then you see them all sit down to eat in quiet, pensive thought. And as you see this, it all fades. Gravar goes to nothing. Someone's rustling. Gravar goes to nothing. Kale goes to nothing. Arya goes to nothing. Malachi goes to nothing. And Hestia does not disappear, but her visage changes. She changes from a young sort of forge master who looks worried about what is to come into an old and tired and battle-worn person who looks to be wearing similar stuff and carrying similar stuff, but all of it looks worn. All of it looks damaged. All of it looks like she didn't get the time that she needed. She feels she has a look in her eyes of someone that's lost everything. And she has tears running down her face. She now sits alone in a dark room. None of the objects that were around her a moment ago are there. None of the people that were around her a moment ago are there. She just sits alone.
Oh man. That's kind of rough. I myself would kind of be like, oh, so this is tough. There's only one way to go about it, I guess. Father would
Iris steps
slowly
forward,
approach.
approaches Hestia, and says, "Excuse me, dear. Are you okay?" Oh, oh, another person. Oh, hello. Yes, I suppose I am. I suppose I am. I apologize. It's just, I needed some. I know what is to come, and I needed to remind myself of the good times. You don't know me, friend. What is your name? Mine is Iris. And yours? Oh, I suppose I have been known by many names. My friends knew me as Hestia the True Strike. I do not know if I can call them friends anymore, or rather if they would know me as a friend. After, well, let us not dwell on it. This was just the last moments of my time with them, and I cherish these memories greatly. I apologize. I am taking up the exhibit. Would you care to try it? I do not know if you have experienced this before. Iris looks to her and says, "What do you mean?" Hestia, seeing that the two of them are stood in the same area as each other, gestures and says, well, if we shared a memory together, this would be going differently at the moment. I fear that I am standing in your way. Allow me to exclude myself." She steps out of the dark area and clocks all of you. She hadn't seen you before. Her eyes are puffy, and she's got old tear streaks down her face. She's got new ones still forming, and she is doing that sort of shallow breathing that you get when you're not quite right. You know, when someone asks you if you're doing okay, and it's just enough to tip you over the edge, ready to cry. She looks like she's got that sort of a feeling, and although she looks up to acknowledge you, she sort of keeps her head down and doesn't really fully look. She stands there, morose and just breathing. As she steps away from this exhibit, as she's called it, Iris takes a step further in, and you see something start to emerge around Iris. Starting from where she's centered, a field of grass appears, and sheep appear. And she's no longer holding a sharpened shepherd's crook, it's just a shepherd's crook. She looks younger in her years. She looks like she's wearing this beautiful, simple, humble robe. And while she stands there, she looks around at her sheep, and she looks content. She looks like she's in her best moments, in her best element. I'm gonna roll now to see what happens for her. She looks to the edge of her flock, as she is often wont to do, and in tried and true fashion, you see her leap to the defense of one of her sheep. She sees off towards the edge a wolf sort of slinking their way in from the forest edge. It doesn't look to be acting like a normal predator would. but it's got a hunger in its eyes, and it looks wafer thin. It looks like it's not been feeding much. She goes to the defense of her flock, but she also seems to recognize in this moment that this wolf is tired and alone and hungry. And having the rations on her that she would have kept for her daily lunch, she offers it on the ground to the wolf and steps back. The wolf comes up and laps at it, and you see this fade, and you see another moment in time. You see no longer grass surrounding her. You see Iris stood at a bubbling brook. You see water running along, and you see her standing in the middle of this brook. She's still wearing the same robe, only it doesn't look as tattered as it did before. She looks sort of younger in her years. She's stood just allowing the water to pass, just being in the moment. She's still got that same shepherd's crook, but it's down on the grass on the banks of the brook. And she stands and watches all of the water go by as she just rinses her ankles in quiet contemplation. You see all of this fade away again, and you see another moment in time. You see her much, much younger now. You see her not in those robes anymore. You see her in sort of a simple tunic, simple sort of doublet tunic with something covering her bottom half, although not quite a skirt, not quite trousers. The kind of thing that a kid might wear, a child Mothra anyway. And she's sat with other Mothra children, and you recognize the wolf behind her outside. It looks young. It looks sort of tired still, but it's also with its cubs, and she has clocked it out through the window as a child herself. This all fades, and she is left alone in the dark room again, and she steps out of the exhibit. Oh my. Oh my. Oh my. I'm sorry. Tear comes to her eye, and it falls down her cheek. I did not expect to see my old friend again. What a delightful. I'm so sorry. What is this? What is this place? I did not expect this. And Hestia looks to her and says, This is the Museum of Life. It shows you your past. It is exhibits of your own memories. It reaches into a person and brings out the favoured parts of your history, I suppose. I assume you had some link with the wolf in these images? Oh, yes. Oh, I did. Oh, yes. I never gave him a name. It felt wrong to name a part of nature. Felt like I would be taking something away from him. He was a true companion in the end. Before I met my end. He used to stand watch over the flock. Oh, I do miss him. I'm sure he's doing fine without me, though, if indeed he has not eaten the entire flock. And she sort of laughs to herself, but you look at Iris and you see someone crying, but you get a sense that they're happy tears, and that she experienced something happy in that moment, despite her obvious look of just being downtrodden by the events.
Such a little sweetheart. Oh my god.
What do you want to do? What do you say anything to Hestia? What do you want? She's just sort of stood looking at the floor at the moment. She looks like she's let everything get the better of her.
I don't know exactly what I have in my pack, but I can't imagine that I don't have any cloths or anything. So I want to offer her a little clean cloth so she can dry her tears because I feel really bad. Here, look, emotions have been running really high with a lot of us for a while now. So, like, I can't imagine being where you are right now and going through what you've gone through, but we want to make things as okay as they can be so that no one has to, you know, feel like this anymore.
She hears your words but doesn't really look up to behold you. She sort of doesn't reach her hand out to take the cloth. She sort of gives that shallow nod of a person that looks utterly empty. Someone that's lost everything. And she doesn't register. Really, it doesn't seem like she's taken in what you've said.
Oh my god. She'd make me so sad, bro. Why do you do these things? Well then
And you
given
sad,
that
I
she
started actually tearing up at a fictional
I
character.
know, I can tell. I can hear the emotion. But then given that she doesn't reach out to take it, I think Father would like gently press it into her hand. You know.
She sort of has a sharp intake of breath as if she's just awoken from something, and she looks down at her hand and sees your hand in hers and a cloth between you. And she sort of gets that look of resolution in her eyes as if, oh, I've just realised that I'm crying. Oh dear, you know? And she takes that moment to pat at her eyes, not daintily, but with the big meaty hand of a blacksmith, of like someone that just smacks themselves in the face with it and carries on. And then she looks up at you and sees this furball. I think you're. How tall is Farlan again? What are you, 6'6", something like that? 7 foot?
Something like that, yeah. It's something. I think he was 7 foot.
Okay. So I think we said that she's about 10 foot tall. So
Yeah,
she,
I couldn't remember if it was 9 or 10.
even to a tall person like Farlan, like she's fucking huge.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not used to that. You're sort of looking up at her, crying down onto you. And as she doesn't need to raise her eyes by much to be able to see you, because you're stood right next to her, you see a look in her eyes change. And you see her eyes sort of start to widen as she looks at you. And then her eyes dart to the person to your right, Icarus. And then they look over towards Harrion and Fabius, and she seems to change in her behavior and her countenance. You can give me an insight check, anyone that wants to.
Yeah, I'll do that. It's an 18.
Anyone get any better than an 18?
No, not better than 18.
I didn't even
No?
know that I had a
Okay.
4 in insight.
Wow, that was pretty good. She sees you, and you get a sense that it's not for the first time. She's sort of dumbfounded. She's not saying anything.
I know we just sort of already asked you if you're all right, but are you all right? Like, what's going on in that head of yours right now?
Oh my. I'm sorry. I lost myself for a moment. Or a few. I What brought you here? Tell me.
I forgot her goddamn name. have them all written
Aria.
down, but I can't
It's
remember what it
Aria.
was. Okay, thank God. I was like, it's definitely Aria because it's not Kale, because I know which one Kale is. It's not Mark. It's not Gravar. And this is Hestia.
Yeah.
But my mind went, we were told by Aria, Queen Aria, that we would find you here. We thought we'd found you before, but it wasn't you. It was a shapeshifter.
Oh,
And
yes.
we kind of nearly died a little bit, but we're okay now, mostly.
I understand.
Mostly.
Okay. Tell me, how much do you know?
We know about you guys being Borogungra, and we know that we need boons.
I see.
And we know we have to defeat Belladonna.
Okay. Right. I see that there is much to explain. Let us start at the beginning, then, I suppose. She takes your hand, as I imagine your hand is still in hers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And feeling sort of reminiscent of a moment from your childhood, where someone so much taller than you taking you by the hand, she takes Farlan by the hand and leads Farlan into this exhibit. I'm just going to move you up there. She takes you to this exhibit and says, this may take some time to explain, but I believe that this exhibit will do it better than I ever could. Please, just be in the moment. And she turns around and steps away, and it stops being a black room again. We see Farlan, not dissimilar sort of age from what you are at the moment. You see that everything around you is sort of grassland, similar to what you knew in your home. You see the sky above remains overcast, as you knew the material plane to be, and you are stood by Stramata at the edge of a forest clearing. You hear a rustling in a thick brush, and you feel yourself sort of moving towards it to inspect it. Give me an investigation roll.
Oh God, a 1, but not a nat 1.
Stramata snarls and dives headfirst into the thicket.
Jeez, I wonder what this would possibly be.
Goes running off.
I follow her.
Okay. You find Stramata stood in a clearing of trees beyond, with sort of the twist of roots breaching up through the soil and with branches laying low from the canopy, dead leaves all over the ground, rotten fruit still sitting on the ground there. And you see Stramata stood in this clearing, no longer snarling, no longer really doing anything, as a vicious looking snake is coiled up to her, but is licking at her feet.
Oh, I forgot about. Oh,
And
yeah.
is calmly sort of nuzzling up to Stramata and just sort of like nosing at Stramata.
That is a little friend you got there.
Yeah. You see things change, things shift, like sort of, it's like when you look through a pane of glass and you don't just see what's behind it, but you also see the reflection that's behind you. it's sort of like that in this moment. You see like a reflection cast over this whole image, and you see a different thing around you altogether. You see that instead of Stramata running off into the thicket, that you're still stood at the forest edge. And instead of there being a snake nearby, you see the rustling continue. What does Farland do?
He'd go towards the other rustling, or at least, try and see if it sounds familiar to anything he
Okay.
would know about wildlife sounding.
So in this moment, as you see you still see the snake sort of nuzzling up against Stramata, but in this second image that appears over it, you see Tane jump out of the grass and tackle you around the legs as Toruk jumps down from a tree and grabs the top half of you, and the two of them, in a pincer movement, tackle Farland to the ground. They wrestle you to submission. Give me a contested strength roll. I'm going to roll for them.
Okay.
They got a 19 with nothing to add.
Shit, I got an 18. Damn
Oh,
it.
Farland
No.
it's close, but Tane is right over your neck, and Toruk is getting you in a figure four lock in the legs, and you are ready to pin. You're ready to be pinned, and they say, "Do you yield? Do you yield?"
No.
Yield, uncle!
Ah!
And it all fades, and it moves on. And Farland is sitting younger than he was in that last moment. Sitting sort of, looks like he's got something in his hands. He's looking at a small flute made of bone. It looks unfamiliar to him, like he's seeing it for the first time. He is inspecting it. He's looking at all the different parts of it. He's looking at the cuts and the nicks on the edges, the knurling and the worn patches, the simple but precise and impressive piece of work. He's marveling at the work of his grandfather, who created this bone flute, as he sits outside of the family home in the grass. Give me a performance check.
Oh my god, an 8.
An 8. Farland, you hear your mother's voice, Anway, calls out to you, Farland! Farland! Where are you?
Can I give it a little toot?
You're not doing your studies. You know, if you're gonna be a part of the whole of this clan, you gotta work on your druid craft. Come back inside.
Sad toot. Not very good one, because he rolled bad.
Similarly, again, you see this sort of like a pane of glass over all of it. You see a second image. And try again at playing the flute for me.
13.
You hear the footsteps coming out to you through the grass of a different set of footsteps than those of your mother. You recognize these to be those of your father, the beloved Bryn. As you knew him in life, he comes outside and sees Farland sitting with the flute. He regards you as he looks down and sits down next to you, sort of at an angle, slightly facing you. And he's wearing the same old cardigan that he always used to wear, and he's got the same sort of grey in his hair that you're used to seeing. Although you see it anew at this point than you ever did before. And he turns to the young Farland and says, what do you got there?
Well, it's Grandpa's flute. I've got it now.
I can see that, but Do you know how to play it?
I actually think I'm pretty good at it.
Okay. Give me a little tip there.
Do I roll again? Am
Give
I
me another
rolling
roll.
again?
Give
Oh
me
my
another roll.
god. Oh my god, it's a 12.
I can see that you clearly got the heart for it, young Farlan. But I think we're going to need to work on your technique. Your grandfather would be proud if he could see you today. Why don't we take some time this arvo and work on it together? How's that?
I actually think that I'm pretty good at it now, but I think I could be maybe really good at it if we did that. So, yeah.
That's what I thought. And he reaches up his big furball hand and tussles the hair in between your two nubby horns that are just growing in.
Oh my god, that's so cute.
And this fades away again. And you see an even younger Farlan. He's lying down in the grass. It's the summer solstice. The sun is high in the sky, and the clouds are shaping themselves as they move in the sky overhead. It's one of those unusual days that didn't seem quite so overcast as the rest, where you could actually make out the shape of the clouds. It was a beautiful time to be alive, and something that you feel a pang of regret as you look upon through these second eyes, and as you see through your own child eyes. You see your sister, Elira, lying on the grass alongside you, studying the exact same clouds. You see a blob and another blob, and seemingly from out of nowhere, you see the sun beam out, a beam of light that just seems to catch on the edge of one of these clouds. Give me a perception check.
30-20.
This looks exactly like a gorgeous flower. What do you do in this moment?
He'd be very sort of like, and he'd just very violently grab Lyra's arm. Lyra, look, there's a flower.
No, it's not. I don't see a flower.
What do you mean?
Where's
It's
the
a
flower?
flower.
That's not a flower.
It's
That's
a flower.
that's a cloud. That's just a blob. You don't know what you're talking about, Farlan.
Looks like a flower.
It's not a flower.
I'm not saying it is a flower. It just looks like a flower.
I don't believe you. It doesn't look like one.
It totally does.
You see through your eyes as you get up to run off to find your parents to try and settle this argument, grabbing Elira's hand and dragging her with you. You find a younger Bryn doesn't have the grey in his hair, and you don't have the nubs even yet. And you pull him outside to take a look, and he settles the argument. Now, again, as you see this scene, you see the mirror effect again, and you see a different image of what happened. You see through your eyes as Farlan and Elira lie together on the grass. You don't see the flower. You see the visage of a warrior, of a hunkered down beast of a person carrying a large weapon, and you see this clear as day. Pardon the pun. You see this creature. I see Lauren enjoyed that one. You see this creature. It's good to get 2 laughs of approval. You see the creature sort of hunkered down, faceless visage, but clearly ready to fight. What do you think Farlan would do in this moment?
I don't think he'd like it.
do you think a child like Farlan would sort of disregard this kind of thing and pretend like he hadn't seen it, or would he comment on it and say it wasn't nice, or would he not do anything at all? What do you think he does in this moment?
I think in that moment he just asks Elira like, "What? You know those clouds up there?
Yeah,
Do you look like anything to you?"
they're all blobs. I don't know why you ever ask me this.
Elira, it doesn't just look like whatever, man.
You see in that mirror pane, you see the a third option. You see that something that you actually remember happening. You see Farlan running off to a flower bed later in the day, and both he and Elira are putting their hands out to touch these dead flowers, and a beautiful rose that appeared exactly the same as it was in the clouds appears there in the flower bed. And you see through those same eyes Farlan running off to find their parents and them coming back and finding it already gone.
Bastards. Kids next door.
And it all fades to black, and you're stood in a dark room in the museum again. Do you understand?
So it's like different paths. Like I don't remember all of this happening. Like
I see I
different
may
things.
need to explain further. She takes you by the hand again and leads you out, and then takes Harrion by the hand and leads Harrion inside. You see Harrion. Oh, and by the way, Christina, I'm going to ask you in some of these to play Gwenru, if you wouldn't mind, since Gwenru was an integral part of Harrion's history. So Harrion, not too much younger than what he is now, is sitting by a rock wall that has sort of an unusual formation to it. It looks like this rock grew in some way. In a world filled with magic, this isn't unusual, but for a rock to look like it's got a handprint in it is fairly unusual. You've seen people grow things before in Grand Druidcraft. You've never seen it look quite like this. And he is sat down and regards this rock, and it seems like he's waiting to hear his name called. You know, the look of a person that's sat outside of the doctor's office in a clinic. As Gwenru steps out and approaches him. Hello, Gwenru.
Hello.
So did Aiden accept you into the Silent Hand?
Yeah, he did.
Gwenru, you know that they're ready for him.
Yeah.
And you were told to pass on a message to send him in.
Oh. Gonna take it.
I'm hearing Lucy here.
Have you sent me a message?
Go on.
Oh, I was just asking if you did send me a message.
No, Aiden told you to send him in.
Oh. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so I'm gonna. He has been accepted, or I have been accepted. I'm a bit confused.
I think you're getting distracted by a baby, so let's just move on from this. So Gwenru turns to Harrion and says that Aiden says that they're ready for him and that he should go inside. So Harrion stands and moves up and walks through this stone rock wall. It looks like it's some kind of illusion there. And someone created this to stand there permanently to dissuade people from randomly walking into the crew headquarters. And he steps inside and you hear the name Harrion come from a familiar voice of Aiden, the spider. Then you see a reflection again, this mirror pane, and you see that Gwenru doesn't come. That Harrion sits. He sits for minutes. He sits for hours. He sits until the time passes altogether and things go dark. And in this time, he looks like he's contemplating. He looks like he has other things on his mind besides this anyway. And he gets out a little wooden block and he starts to tap idly on it. A little beat, a little tune. He can't make a beat to save his life. He's never done this before. But he keeps it with him anyway, and this seemed like the right time to pull it out. He's always carried it with him, and he's always sort of waited for that motivation to pull out some musical instrument and try it, and this is the moment. Doesn't feel right to him. So you see Harrion in this reflection go to a stick that he sees on the ground that he's been eyeing up for the last few hours, and he walks up to this hollowed log and he starts beating on the side of it. Doesn't feel right. Doesn't seem to quite grasp his attention. Doesn't feel like in the moment like it's something that Harrion would want to do. And then he sees these seed pods hanging down from the same tree that this log fell from. And these seed pods look, he's seen them before. They rattle when they fall to the ground. And he knows that familiar rattle. And he goes over and he picks one up and he starts shaking it. And yeah, that feels right. This feels right. Yeah. Okay. And you see these two worlds, so to speak. Then it all fades to black again. And you see that Harrion is a bit younger this time. He is sitting on a tree stump in the middle of a forest. His stomach rumbles as he sits there and cuts in with pain. He hasn't eaten in a long time, but he loves his family. The problem is that their humble life is a struggle to live. He sees his friend Gwenru coming through the forest brush. Let me roll for this. Okay. He tells Gwenru that he's got some gold on him. Hey Gwenru, I've got some money on me for once. I figure I should really start getting some armor for myself if we're going to keep doing this. Do you want to go down to the armorers in town?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Where did you get your armor from? It looks pretty good.
I found it.
You found it? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Found it. I understand. Right, okay. And the two of them walk off in that direction. Then you see this mirror pane again. And you see that there is another Harrion, same Harrion, sat there. This time he looks slightly different than before. You're starting to pick up on subtle differences. It doesn't look like it's much a different scenario, but it does look like he is a different Harrion. He sees Gwenru coming out of the forest brush and asks if she's ready to go to the local store. Hey, Gwenru, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
And you see in this moment that Harrion and Gwenru walk off in the direction of town, and that the store front is closed. But that's not what Harrion was going there for. Harrion is hungry, and Harrion's family is hungry, and they have not eaten in days. He needs to get something for his family, and so the goal here was to break in and steal the food. And it all goes to black. And you see a different scene this time. You see this time you see a different person altogether. This one is not Harrion. This time you see a kind-eyed elf who stands in the middle of a very small, very modest hut. It's a single room on a single floor with a bed in the corner and a bucket in another and a small food preparation area in another. He stands by the door with the minimal light that comes in these days as he gazes lovingly over his wife and young son, Harrion. They are both in bed. And I'm going to roll for this one. Well, that's a 9. Could barely see that. Maybe there is something to be said for glasses. You hear the front door gets bashed hard and abrupt. And it's not a surprise to this person. This Mr. Bladebrook. David never specified which of his parents was called which. I just know them as Karis and Hanny. So I'm assuming that Karis is a guy and Hanny is a woman. But who's to know? So we'll call this one Karis. This is Karis Bladebrook, the dad. And he is not surprised in this moment by the knock. As loud and abrupt as it is, he seemed like it didn't shock him. It didn't startle him. And he turns to the door, takes a deep breath, and opens it. The conversation that follows is enough to wake Harrion, who comes to the door. This seems to dissuade the caller, who turns and walks away. But this seemed like it had a very tense atmosphere, and things may have changed in that moment if Harrion had not been there. Then you see this mirror pane again, and nobody knocks. The covers are slightly different colour. There's a bit more light this time. Seems like there's food on the side, but the same person stands in the same place and stares at the same two people. And a young Harrion stirs in bed. He sits up and rubs his eyes, this tiny person. Tiny Harrion. He's not shat himself in bed, you'd be pleased to hear. And he sort of looks up as he blinks to try and see better in the dark. And he beholds his dad stood there looking at him. And he says, "Hi, Dad. Good morning. What are you doing? Just stood there." And his dad tells him, I've been thinking. I've got something for you. I think that you might like. I think that maybe now might be a good time for us to begin. Come here. And you see a young Harrion climb out of bed over his still sleeping human mother, and Harrion, the half elf, walks over towards his dad in the middle of the room, and Karis kneels down in front of this really truly tiny Harrion and produces from his back pocket a small wooden toy sword, and he hands it over to him. "This, my son, is your first sword. Do you like it?" And Harrion looks at it, and although this seems like a different building, is still as modest, still as simple. And he looks down at this hand-carved sword that looks like it's been hacked together by his dad. And he clearly can tell, because he's lived this life and he knows that times are hard, that this was not given easily, that this took time, that this was time that his dad could have spent doing something else. Even a Harrion at this age knew this, because this young Harrion had to grow up fast, had to grow up quick, because times were hard, and because he had to do his piece to try and help his family out. And knowing this, even at this young age, this brief moment of childhood that he still had left, he looks down at his sword and looks up at his dad with this hopeful look in his eyes, and he says, "I love it, Dad. Thank you, Dad." And it all fades to black, and you see Harrion in full hippo glory, in hot pants and a tied-up shirt, silently weeping to himself with a smile on his face. That was my favourite memory. I'm sorry, guys. Let me. I'll just take a moment for myself. And Harrion walks over to the edge of the crowd and stands there, away from the rest of you. Do you understand now what is happening? Do you see?
Kinda. I don't know.
I see it. It may take some more time.
Sorry.
Please, and she gestures to Icarus and Fabius. Which of you is next to do your best to see what is going on?
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
As Icarus is closest to her, and she is 10 foot tall, and he is 2 foot tall, she sort of gets down to one knee and she puts a hand down on the ground. A hand that is truly the same size as Icarus, if a little bit smaller. And she basically like gives you a loving nod and gestures for you to climb on top of her hand so that she can gently carry you over to the exhibit. Icarus gently climbs on top, and she picks you up gently and walks over to the exhibit and deposits you in this dark space. And all of the black changes. You see a younger Icarus. You see some of that sort of fur that moths have that gets dusted off over time as they get older and they knock into things like windows and shit. That dust is no longer left. That there's more there. There's more fur. There's more sort of, you know, bulk about Icarus. You can clearly tell that Icarus is a bit younger. And you see an Icarus who is sat in sort of quiet contemplation, looking up at the sky, as they are wont to do. They're peering at the sun, dazzled by it. And Icarus, you hear a familiar set of footsteps approach as you're absorbed in your thoughts. Before you know what's happened, you realise that your brother, Lapix, has sat down next to you. Roll me a perception check.
I'm not doing good on rolls today. Right, perception.
Can relate.
5.
Lapix sort of sits there and waits for you to, you know, attend him with your eyes, sort of thing, waiting for your attention. And eventually, when he realizes that you're in the moment and that you're not staring at your beloved son, he turns to you and says, Icarus, brother, I don't really feel like this is a place for me anymore. I've taken some time and I've given it some thought, and I've decided that I'm going to leave. I'm going to find a place for myself, a place for me to, a place for me to be me, away from this. I wanted you to be the first to know.
Okay. Like somewhere you can be as happy as when, like, I look at the sun.
Oh, Icarus. Should it always be the sun?
I mean, I like the sun. You don't have to like the sun. It'd be great if you liked the sun. But like, if you like something else as much as I like the sun, you know, I feel like you'd have a great time.
He has like a tired look in his eyes, as if this is a conversation that has happened many times before. And he looks upon you with love, but also a hint of exhaustion as he regards you, Icarus, and says, Brother, I love all that the sun shines on, but I have and will always see it as simply a source of light to shine my way through the world, not an end goal. And you see the glass pane effect again, where you see this reflection and another, and you see a different event. This time, Icarus, you've got sort of different markings on your wings. You've got sort of different coloration on your body, as does Lapix. And Lapix is sat next to you, and Lapix turns and again waits for your attention. But this time he's slightly less patient than the other time. And Lapix says, "Brother, are you going to the tithe this year? It seems like a rather good time. It seems like it's about the only time that you can actually get anything worth getting. Do you know what I mean?"
Sure, yes. I know what you mean. Yeah.
The tithe was
Um,
the tithe was the festival of sacrifice that happened every 80 years, where people would be sacrificed in the name of keeping the gods away. It's what led to the thing that happened, the cataclysm in the very first session that we ever played. The one it was before you joined. But yeah, the tithe is part of the history of the material plane, where it's basically a pact with the gods that the mortals kept to keep sacrificing people to them every 80 years, so that they would keep away from the material plane and leave the mortals to their work, to their play. And it was usually people who were given the death penalty who would be sacrificed because they felt that that was the better way of doing it. But yeah, that's basically the history of it. But you generally know that every 80 years, because so many people come around for this festival, this sacrifice, that this whole sort of fate festival, sort of parade kind of deal has always happened around it since. That this is a place for people to sell their wares, sell their fruits that haven't gone to waste yet, sell all of the best bits because they know that everyone's going to be there. So yeah, he's asking you whether you're going to go to that, basically.
you know, maybe they have some like stalls that sell like carvings of the sun or something. Do you think they'd have that? I think I'd like to go if they have that.
They certainly do. I am sure of it. I have not
Let's
lived long enough to
together.
see it myself, but they have everything else, so why not? Let us go.
We should go together. I can go to a stall I want, and then you can go to a stall you want, and then we can go back to a sun stall.
And he seems to really be agreeable with this. And
Just
everything
imagining a
fades.
bowl.
Everything fades to black. And yeah, it would just be a ball, wouldn't it? Just a wooden ball. I mean, my mind's eye, I saw a two-dimensional image that was carved with rays.
My mind went
But
to that, but then I was like,
yeah, okay, yeah, I see that. I see that. Yeah, so we see a different event. Everything fades to black and comes up again, and we see Icarus sort of sat outside again, only different sort of setting, different area. And you see an Icarus who is rubbing their leg as if they've got a cramp. Like they look sort of embarrassed, like they did something that they feel silly about. Roll me an athletics or acrobatics check.
13.
13. With the 13, you see this version of Icarus. You see through Icarus's eyes again. Icarus's wings weren't working fully. You know that it took you until you got to the Undying Lands for your wings to fully, like, get to their best. Like, you had a brief moment in the material plane where you could finally fly up towards the sun, but that was just before your death. So in your time on Earth, most of that time was spent walking or trying to fly. And your wings at this point were not quite as strong as they could have been. And you see that you are rubbing the cramp out of your leg because you tried to get close to the sun by climbing a tree. and unfortunately, you got overworked and you hurt your leg and fell to the canopy below. And this poor Icarus is on the ground looking rather sheepish because they've just hurt their leg. How do you think Icarus would act?
I'd first look around if anyone saw me, if I could just like play this off.
Give me a perception check and we'll see. It was just going to be one skill check per event, but we'll do a second one.
7. I'm
7.
not rolling well.
With a 7, you don't see Lapix stood about 30 feet away from you, regarding you with love and that hint of exhaustion again. And you see this glass pane effect shine again, and you see a different kind of Icarus, different wings again, yet still different antennae, and you see that he's sat down rubbing his leg. They're sat down rubbing their leg because they got into something that they couldn't see. It was like an invisible force field, like they couldn't manage to get past it, and they just could not figure out what was wrong. But they could see the sun on the other side of it, and they were flapping their wings as hard as they could, but they just couldn't get past this invisible force field. What do you think that Icarus would do? You still see the sun, and it's still there, and you can't see what's in front of you.
I think I'd stop flying for a minute and try and puzzle my way out of this. I think I'd sit on the ground and I'd try and see if I could go underneath, and then
Okay.
I assume that I can't. So I'm assuming this is a window.
You
or like
are,
the
in
black.
fact, right. This is a window. You can see all of the dust and markings of your body that have been rubbed up against the window, and now it is no longer invisible. Now it is definitely opaque, with your belly rubbings, basically. True story. This is inspired by true happenings in my life this week, with a moth got stuck in my bathroom and wouldn't get the fuck out. I've still got a dust rubbing all the way up the fucking window because I can't be asked to
Lovely.
clean it. Right, and we get to a younger Icarus still, getting themselves ready in the morning. Today is an important day. His mother, nauseate, and his father, Daedalus, their father, Daedalus, are taking them to the sundial. This time of year is a perfect time of year to be able to see the great sundial in all of its beauty, where it catches the sunlight in just the right way as it comes down through the tree canopy in the sun temple and shines the time down onto the ground. Give me a... let me think of what skill this would be. Perception check. Or an insight check. Let's add your insight to this roll instead.
15.
Oh, 15. Icarus sees the sun shine down on this and is immediately awed at the way that the sun can push the shadows away. How do you think Icarus acts?
I think Icarus would get very excited, and their wings would just like flutter behind them, and they'd just be like, "Oh my god, guys! Oh my god! Oh my god! Look! The shadows are fading! The shadows are fading! It's the sun!"
Now we see the same mirror effect happen, and we see an Icarus this time who is all in black for the first time. No coloration at all, no light spots, nothing. You are just all in black. And this Icarus sees the sundial, and it doesn't shine normally. This Icarus seems unimpressed that they see the sun act on the sundial, and it doesn't really seem all that great. Maybe they should take a look at the moon more often. What do you think this Icarus is thinking?
I wish it did something more fast. It's so slow, and nothing really happens. It's boring here. And maybe the moon is great. I'll have to look more into the moon and how it illuminates, because the moon seems great as well. And the moon is the moon. Just, but like, maybe it's also as slow as the sun. Is there such thing as a moon dial? Could you tell time at night?
While this Icarus is stood in the Sun Temple saying all of this out loud, I'm imagining, all of the people stood around you in the Sun Temple are completely oblivious because they are all just as absorbed as every other Icarus moment in Icarus's life has ever been. And as this Icarus looks around the temple, they see the faces of their father, their mother, and all of the elders of this Sun Temple, all of them looking up, all of them dazzled, all of them oblivious to what's being said around them. And in that moment, this Icarus starts to feel a little bit of compassion for how Lapix must have felt. And everything fades to black. Please, do you see? Do you see? You see, don't you? You see.
Memories of time.
I can tell this one is a sharp one. I think that you're beginning to understand, but perhaps you over there in the back, young Squirian with the large bird. Ah! Would you care to try? Perhaps this might be the one that illuminates all.
I can try.
So this Fabius steps inside. Titanis doesn't really have two brain cells to rub together, so Titanis does not move. Titanis just sort of stands there. He's just a little guy. And
little big guy.
we see Fabius stood with his brothers, Cornelius, Michael, and Nicholas. And as Fabius stands there, they are surrounded by a group of trees shrouded in mist. The rest of you recognize this as the place that you went to when you first entered the Undying Lands. The group of brothers walk into the mist, and each of them sort of loses track of each other. As Fabius walks into the mist, he sees visions of how he could have died. That was something that none of you ever figured out before. I'm telling you that now because you probably won't otherwise. But
No, I thought that it was like a possibility thing.
it was how you should have died.
Right.
Anyway, like how you would have died if the cataclysm hadn't happened, basically.
Okay.
Right. So you were little Easter egg there, little treat, little treaty treat. Hope you enjoy it. It was delicious. So as Fabius walks in and sees these visions and manages to uncloud his mind, he steps out beyond the trees, looks back at the mist and at all of these awful-looking, half-headed creatures that are feeding on the souls of those that walk out, and he regards some figures walking towards him. Fabius, please roll me a perception check.
Yep. Oh. 12.
12. He stands there as he's the first to leave the mist, and he's always sort of been the strongest. He's always been the one that had to be the most dependable because the rest of his brothers just sort of had other thoughts on their mind. And Fabius stands and waits for his brothers to exit the mist, as the same that he did. He sees Cornelius step out, and he sees Nicholas step out, but he does not see Michael step out of the mist. He stays there. Fabius stands and waits. Fabius waits silently. you see time pass by in an instant as the hours turn to days, the days turn to weeks, and eventually you see Cornelius and Nicholas grieve, but eventually leave. They move on to the rest of the Undying Lands. They move on to the Spine. But Fabius sits and waits for years. Fabius grows angry. Fabius feels that he should have protected his family better. Fabius vows to never let it happen again. How do you think Fabius feels in this moment, Christina, after he's been sat there for years with the anger growing in him?
First, very frustrated.
Do you think that Fabius would
maybe-
have tried to go into the mist to try and find Michael? Or do you think he would have stayed
Yeah,
there and waited?
yeah. I think he would go into the mist.
Okay. As you see this figure of Fabius sort of step trepidatiously into the mist, you see the reflection again. This time you see that Michael does come out, but Cornelius doesn't. You see a different Fabius. You see he's got sort of grey coloration rather than red. You see that he seems to hold himself differently. And you see the supportive Michael has different words for him than Cornelius did when Michael hadn't come out in the other reflection. And you see this Michael encouraging him to move on and to try and find another way. And this Fabius seems to be more receptive to that. Fabius, what do you think you would have done in that moment? Ready to move on and live a happy life? Or a second life, I suppose, in Undying Lands.
Yeah, I think he would not be as mad as the second time, maybe more contemplated maybe.
Yeah. So sort of less angry, but not necessarily more happy.
Yeah.
Just able to move on and what do they call it? Compartmentalize it? Put it off into one section of his soul and just leave it there, rather than denying that it exists. Yeah. Okay. We see this fade to darkness. We see a different scenario. This time it's before the mist. It's before the fateful events of that first day when they met Farlan. This time they see the group, all of you, sees that this Fabius is a little squirrel. He's no longer turned into a Squirian. He's not been through that period of his life yet. And he's lost his nuts, but he's doing his best to try and find them. His brothers and his family are hungry, and he's always been the one that gathers for food. But he does hear his brother Michael scream for help in that moment. Fabius, give me an investigation check.
19.
19. You get through the thicket of grass and you see a large fox, sort of similar looking to a fox that you've been travelling with for the last few hours. It's staring down at your brother Michael in this grassy clearing sort of in the middle of all these thorns. And there is a huge humanoid behind this fox, and it is swinging at Michael with a weapon. What do you think that Fabius does?
I think first Fabius would be intimidated and scared, and then try to fight back and
as you start to fight back, all of the commotion, all of the sound, all of the noise of this fight and the screaming of Michael calling for help attracts the attention of Cornelius and Nicholas, who join in the fight. And We all know what happened on this fateful day. But then you see a mirrored reflection again. And this time, when you come upon Michael in the clearing, there is a fox, the same fox, slightly different coloration. Again, maybe a little cut scar to their nose. This one is yapping at Michael, but this time it's sort of licking him. Michael seemed like he got sort of nervous and overreacted. You know, like squirrels do. When you go near a squirrel, they just immediately run away. Well, this Michael couldn't do that. He was frozen in place, but the fox didn't seem to want to hurt him. Instead, this time, the fox is joined by this giant furbolg, who understands what Michael is saying and is talking to him. This is the first time that a humanoid has ever spoken to you or your kind before, and you've been able to understand what they've said. What do you think that Farlan and Fabius would say to each other in this moment, the two of you?
Oh, what would we say? I think maybe both would be a bit like confused and maybe like surprised that we understand each other.
I think that Farlan understands why he understands.
Yeah,
you.
okay. Okay, Fabius would be confused and
What would
yeah,
Farlan
so
say
like-
to Fabius in that moment?
Well, I imagine that up until that point in time, he's been trying to be like, hey, it's okay. Like, it's all right. It's all right. She's not going to hurt you. And then obviously, because Fabius has come along as well,
Yeah.
he'd be like, I'm sorry. It's all right. It's all right. There's not, there's nothing wrong. I'm going to make sure that nothing happens. No one's going to hurt anybody. She's just being friendly. Sorry.
In that moment, Farlan, you see this reflection of you, because you're not stood in this exhibit at this point. You see this from the outside, but you do see that this Farlan, because all of this is from the perspective of Fabius, obviously, so Fabius never got to hear this, but you do see that this version of Farlan understands what Stramata is saying as well, and that Farlan gets to respond to Stramata in that moment, who seems to be just happy to be there, just happy to see these little critters and get to enjoy a day with them.
Love that.
And it all fades to black again. And we get to a point where we see a tiny, tiny little Fabius. This little Fabius is a little wee Fabius, tiny, tiny little squirrel man. He's so small that he's not had the chance to learn to climb yet. He's sort of the one that's holding onto the side of the tree, like holding onto the bark, where his brothers are still on the top of the branch. He has yet to sort of go closer to the edge. They don't know how to climb yet either, but unfortunately, he starts to fall, and he falls out of the tree. Now, Fabius, give me an animal handling check.
13.
13. Little Fabius, sees a fucking huge bird walk up, and this bird wings out. We all know who this bird is, Icarus included. Icarus's favourite creature at this point, I think. And we see Titanis, a younger Titanis, obviously, but a Titanis nonetheless, walk over and sees this tiny, tiny little squirrel and bends down and opens up their cavernous beak and picks up the tiny squirrel and places him back against the tree bark. Can't quite reach up to the branch, mind you, but able to get him close to the tree. And this Fabius is able to grab hold of the bark at last and starts to slowly make their way up the tree. How do you think Fabius feels at this point?
I think he would be, yeah, happy that he got
help, but maybe that it was grateful for the bird, but also maybe a bit confused. He's confused a lot.
Now we see a reflection cast across all of this. And we see a Fabius who has fallen out of the tree and has landed in the canopy below. And again, we see the giant bird come up. But this time, as it bends down to grab the squirrel in its beak, this time Titanus eats Fabius whole, and Fabius dies instantly. And all fades to black.
Oh,
Hestia turns and says,
my goodness.
"Now do you see? Please tell me that you see."
Yeah, is it like different ways we could have died?
Perhaps I need to explain this further. I suppose I haven't explained at all, have I? I'm sorry. I've been at a loss for words. I've not quite been myself. These
May
are
I
the
just
ways.
say,
Go on.
you might have to be a little bit direct because we are slightly neurospicy.
Okay. Hestia sort of clocks that and is immediately like, "Okay, I see." And Hestia, trying to, you see Hestia sort of pause for a moment, and you see that look in a person's eyes where they narrow their eyes slightly, and you see that recognition of, I need to talk to you directly, but not patronize you. Let me think how to talk about this. And you recognize that image, and then you see a Hestia continue again with their patter, only this time make it direct. "I apologize. I have not quite been myself, and this has been a difficult past few years for me. I am at a loss for words in these moments, and I just hope that you can forgive me. Allow me to be more explicit. This whole museum is not only about your memory, it is about your life. And I have met each of you before, but not in these forms. These that you have experienced were your past lives. You have lived and lived again. You have reincarnated. You have had your time and you have died, and you have had your time again and died again. This is not normal. This is not something that normal people have. This is why I need to give you this further piece of information. What do you understand of the old gods?"
Hold on, I'm making a mental note of the things that you have just told me. Give me one moment, please.
By mental, do you mean a pen and paper note?
I do.
You realise that this is
But
being
father-
recorded this time,
But
though?
father, I know, but I like having it in my book so I can just go.
Hestia just simply reaches out her incredible wingspan and puts her arm gently behind all of your backs and scoots you all forward into the exhibit, and then steps back and watches. And each of you sees everything fade to black. You don't see a single one of you. What you do see is void. You see emptiness. You don't see light, you don't see dark. You see the absence of light and dark. You see nothing. There is not a single thing here. Then you see, appearing from out of that nothing, a small sort of speck, a small little iota. And that speck seems to move with purpose. It's not drifting in a breeze, there is no breeze. It's not floating in the wind, there is no wind. There is no nothing. It is on its own in this epic land of nothingness. and this speck becomes 6. And each of these 6 sort of regard each other. You can see that these things are swirling around, and it looks loving. It looks like it's a ballet of love. Like these specks are family with each other. And one of them comes into focus. The rest of them fade into sort of the nothingness and the periphery. That you don't see them anymore. What you see is this being appear, and this being almost looks like a human, only not quite. Like I don't know, like a humble, kind-eyed, gentle-featured person. They wear a robe. They appear to be sort of male, I suppose. And you sort of get a pang in the back of your mind of a name. This name comes to you as Buri. 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 Okay. Buri. And you see in an instant, in a time that passes like millennia in a moment, and a moment in a millennia. Like time doesn't even exist yet. But somehow from this nothingness, everything exists. The universe exists. The world exists in all its glory, in this beautiful sort of cloud of gas, essentially. You sense is the world, and all of the universe around it, and all of the stars, and all of the worlds beyond those. But not any of it really has form yet. And then you see another speck come into focus, and you see this speck shapes itself, and it appears to have a different form. This one doesn't appear to be human. This one is sort of humanoid in shape, but not quite. Sort of a cow's head and heavy horns and sort of strong physique. And this one forms this gas into a world, into land and air and sea and sky and all of that. And it appears to be beautiful. It's exactly the place that you imagine it to look from the outside. You've never seen it from the outside before. You've never been away from this planet and looked back on it, but you have an instinct that this is what this place is. And you have this feeling of a name in the back of your mind of Veles. That is the name of this being, this Veles. And it feels empty. This universe, this world, they feel like they're missing something. And you see another speck come into being. You see this speck comes into focus and the others fade into the background. And you see this being grows tall and grows thin and has a long cape behind it that almost resembles wings. And this being has sort of long stalks coming up high out of their head, like a crown. And this being sort of forms from out of the matter of space and time these 2 orbs. And one of them glows hot and bright and fiery. And Icarus, you see this and you know immediately that this is your favourite light bulb. This is the sun. And they create in their other hand a big whitish, sort of greyish ball, much smaller, but will be much closer, so that the people on this world can marvel at it just in equal measure as to the sun that they have just created. And this you recognise as the moon. And you get an itch in the back of your head again of the name of this creature. And this being, this almighty presence. You get the name Benelos. And you immediately know that this is Benelos, the god of the sun. You didn't know that they were the god of the moon, though. And still, this place feels empty. Still, this place feels like it's lacking in something. And you see another speck come into focus and come into being, and all of the rest of it fades into the background again. And you see this sort of furry being, this sort of, they've got like protruding teeth, and they've got big black eyes, and they've got little ears and a long tail. And you see that this being creates lots of tiny specks, lots of these glowing white things. And it looks like a swarm at first. It almost looks like it's just one big coalescing lump of something. But you soon come to realize that these are the souls of all beings, of all creatures on Earth, of humanoids, of beasts, of monsters, of all manner of living beings that roam the land that Veles created. And you get an itch in the back of your mind of another name, of Qatar. And you get the feeling that perhaps this is the god of animals and people and monsters. And then still it feels empty. Still it feels like there is something lacking in this place. And you see another being. You see a being who is faceless, who is formless, who appears to stand tall, but you don't see much of them because much is buried beneath robes and the face is obscured. And there is something about them that appears to always be in transition, that they are genderless, that they are raceless, that they are formless, that they change with time, and that time changes with them, and that they are just an integral part of transition and change, and that this is an important part of who they are and what they represent. And this world starts to appear to have more meaning to it because there is change for these people to experience. And you get a sense of another name in the back of your mind, of the name Aindret. And you get this idea of this being another being of change and of transition and of movement and travel and seasons and all of the things that change in the world but never really progress, the cycle of life, that kind of thing. And yet still, it all feels kind of empty. It all feels like there's something missing, like these beings exist and they live, but they live forever, and there's nothing really to live for when your goals are all fulfilled before you even reach to 100 cycles of that big yellow orb that Benelos created. And so we come to our final sixth spec. This featureless, formless spec turns into this a beautiful, long black-haired being who looks almost like the female twin to Buri, and she looks sort of like she's allowing these creatures, these beings, to find their time and to enjoy it as best they can. And when they come to a point where they feel tired and can't move on anymore and don't really feel like they need to, she lays them to rest, and she takes them with her to her realm, to their realm, to these six beings' realm. And she carries them gently, lovingly, like a child in her arms. And this sort of long flowing robe matches her long flowing black hair. And you get an itch in the back of your mind again of the name Yuri. And altogether you see these gods. Let's be honest, they are gods. Buri, Veles, Benelos, Qatar, Aindret, and Yuri. And all of these gods exist, and they all stand together, and they move with time, and you see the spin of the world, and you see the spin of the sun, and of the moon, and of the universe itself, all of the galaxy changing and moving and shifting as if time passes in an instant. And each of these beings becomes absorbed in their own worlds, and they all sort of become passive. They stay in their own realms, but they don't really shift from them. They don't really move from them. They don't cross boundaries. They hardly talk to each other anymore, besides Buri and Yuri, who continue to have a coexistence. One creates as the other lays to rest. They are an integral part of each other. There cannot be constant creation, just as there cannot be constant destruction. Either one would be dangerous and terrible. And you see that these beings on this world become impatient. They feel lost. They feel like they've been left alone. They feel like there is no purpose for their being. They feel like they have been created and that they have been left to do nothing with. And they begin to seek power so that they can challenge those who created them. And you see these mortals start to question, and you hear their prayers sort of echoing through space and time to the ears of these that created them. Because they have a sense that something must have. Because how else could they just be here? You, why did you create us? What are we here for? What is our purpose? What is the meaning of this? How dare you create us without having an idea for what to do next? And you see that these mortals, these same mortals that challenge the voice of the gods, the voice of gods that does not return, there is no reply, that these mortals grow in power, that they grow in stature, that they grow to stand up and leave their realm and go to challenge those that held power before them. And you see the form of Belladonna among others, who stand in front of these old gods, this old bunch of ancient, formless, truly uncreated beings, these beings that existed before time and space and who will likely exist after time and space. And they stand afore all of them and they challenge them. And they say, you, why is it that you created us and you just leave us to nothing? Why do you not stand in and help when times are hard? Why do you allow disease to continue to ravage our lands? Why do we stand hungry and alone in this universe? Why are we left to die a pointless death? We would do better in this same place. We are better than you are, and you should stand aside and allow us to stand in your place. And you see Veles steps forward. Veles, the god of the land. Veles, the humble. Veles, the contemplative. And Veles stands and says, of course. I can understand how you might feel that way. But this is how it is, and we are what we are. And there will be no change because there cannot be change. And the mortals challenge them, and the mortals sort of step up and start to change blows. And you start to feel it as you're experiencing this in the museum. You start to feel that you're taking like punches and slashes and magic and fire, and you're being crushed and you're being ripped, and yet you still stand, and you still stand for the world that you created and for the people in it. And you feel all of this tearing away at you. You feel all of it, every last bit. And eventually you see Buri, the humble, kind-eyed one, step into the fray and hold his hands either side and beg each side for peace. Please, please, peace. Peace is what we need. There can be no progress without peace. I would know I am the God that created all of this universe. You see a look in the eye of the most cruel of all of these mortals approach Buri where he can't see, raise up a blade, and cut him down. But you also see Veles. Veles was stood and saw it happen, saw this being approach their brother, and they chose not to do anything. They chose not to raise a hand, or to stop, or even to warn Buri. They allowed it to happen in their passivity, in their passiveness. And Buri dies, and Buri falls to the earth. Buri, you see, lies across a great chasm, that a rift in one of the realms that appears in his wake. As he hits the earth, this world gets shifted into multiple planes of existence from the sheer power of a god hitting this plane. And you recognize this Buri as being the creature, the giant creature that spanned the gap of the chasm in the Undying Lands. That was the old god who created the universe, is the one that now all souls will find their rest. In his final moments, knowing what was going to happen, he sacrificed his body in order to guide souls to their rest, so that all might find rest in his wake, and that the universe could find its rest eventually. And in the wake of this fall, in the wake of Buri dying, Yuri lost all her mind. She goes crazy. She screams out in anger, in fury. She sees how Veles is stood and sees that Veles could have seen what happened and blames Veles for it. Blames these mortals who stand to be the new gods. And Yuri escapes and disappears. And no one can see her and no one can find her. Not in their omnipotent and omniscient gaze can any of the gods, the old or the new, can see where she rests, where she sits. And in that moment, you see the old gods sign this treaty, this agreement with the new gods. And they say that they will go about their days, and they will live them out, and they will be as they should, and they will allow the new gods their place. And the new gods, feeling charitable, but also in a moment of arrogance, stand and say that they will allow the old gods 1,000 lifetimes, and that in those 1,000 lifetimes, that if they should feel that they are able and capable to stand up against these new gods, then they will have their chance, and that they will be able to fight. And if they take it back, then they take it back, and they can try and make a better place. But you see this sort of glimmer of recognition in some of the new gods' eyes that this might just be what they wanted all along anyway. That they wanted the old gods to recognize what it is like to live as a person, so that they can come back to their roles and live them out properly and appropriately. And you see Yuri return. You see Yuri begin to corrupt all of the new gods and start to take their power for her own. And she has decayed them and corrupted them. And instead of laying things to rest, she is now a being of decay and of chaos and of entropy. And Yuri does not go by the name Yuri anymore, since it reminds her of her dearest brother Buri, her twin. And Yuri now goes by the name Anarkara. And that the 1,000 divine candles that laid at the feet of these 6 statues of gods is now, in this moment, as you stand in this museum, down to its last candle. And all fades to black, and you are back in the room as Hestia points to a group of statues over in the far corner that you will each look over to now, and give me a perception check, all of you. Anyone else?
18.
18?
I'm gonna see. I think 19.
19? Okay.
Yeah, 19.
Yeah, okay. So Icarus
I should
and...
roll for Harriet.
I will roll for Harian. Harian got an 11. Harian doesn't see it, and neither does Farlan. But Icarus and Fabius both look over and see with your tiny eyes, these eyes of prey that are used to looking off in far distances and spotting things on the horizon. You see the 6 statues that stand there. You see, with the name Buri underneath it on its pedestal, you see a humanoid dressed in a robe, knelt on one leg. You see another humanoid next, named Yuri, who looks female with the long flowing hair and the long robe also. And then you see a furbolg stood with the name Veles underneath it. And you see a Squirian with the name Qatar underneath it. And you see a Mothra with the name Benelos underneath it. And finally, you see a changeling with the name Aindret underneath it. And Hestia finally says, "You are the old gods. You have this last life left with which to defeat all of it. And if you do not, I fear for what the universe may be. I do not even know if the universe will exist without your presence in it. But this is your final chance. Your passiveness, standing by Veles before, as she regards you, Farlan, your passiveness was what led to this. Please, do not let it be what happens again." And with that, we'll finish the session.
The thing is, you fucker. As soon as you said that it was like the haunt, I was like, oh my god,
Yeah.
you bastard.
Hey, also, I've got some fucking images of some fucking dang what's the word? Fucking gods. There we go. Got there in the end. Let's see. Who have we got? Gods. Blah 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 blah. Oh, and in the moment of, let's see if this works. Does that work? Is that sent? Can you see that?
You have to open them up, but yeah.
Yeah, we can see them.
Yeah. Okay. In the moment that you see each of them stood, that you see them fighting and at war, Icarus, you see in your hand, as you see from Benelos's perspective, you see a grand warhammer, this incredible feat of godly creation, this thing that appears to have been what forged the sun and the moon. And as you gaze upon it, you feel it heavy in your hand as all fades to black. And you are back in the room again. And you see this hammer in front of you, in your hands. And you now have the god hammer named Smother and Spark. So you can choose as a bonus action to, let me get this up because I've actually got it in one of my sheets. So as a bonus action on your turn, you can choose to change its form from Smother to Spark and back again. In its Smother form, in the moon form, it will do an additional 2d8 necrotic damage to any attack that hits. In the Spark form, it will do 2d8 radiant damage to any attack that hits. It is a +4 Warhammer, which means that an attack bonus that you rolled, let me bring up your sheet. So it's your strength plus your proficiency. So that would be 6 plus 4 again, because it's a +4 Warhammer. That would make it +10 to hit. And then the damage type, if you hold it two-handed, you get 1d10. And if you hold it single-handed, you get 1d8. That's just how warhammers work. So if you wanted to like hold a shield, then you could hold it one-handed and you would get slightly less damage. But your like feat, your character feat, means that you get more to hit if you hold it two-handed, which is a +2 if it's the only weapon that you're carrying. So that would mean that you get an attack to hit bonus of 12. Plus the 1d10, and then plus 7 damage. So you would get 1d10 plus 2d8 plus 7. Which is pretty fucking good. So you now have the hammer of a god to swing at people how you want to. Which is a little homebrew hammer of my own. So you're the first person to gain one of those, because you're the last person to gain a magic weapon. You've been carrying around a regular rapier and still stabbing fools and killing everybody better than everybody else does. So yeah, you've now got that. And you can also still do your, is it Divine Smite, I think it's called? Which adds on extra radiant damage if you burn a first level spell slot. So if, say, you're attacking an undead creature, like maybe a zombie, for instance, that you could add a whole shit ton of radiant damage and really fuck their day up. But yeah, you've got it in both forms. You've got Smother and Spark.
I wouldn't have to perpetually see if they kept on 1 HP.
No, exactly, yeah. Yeah, because, they've got the whole, thing. Right, so let me start adding this to your thing. Smother, Spark. Yeah, there you go. So that's the real end to the thing. Yeah. Did you all enjoy that?
Damn, I can't believe you did that.
Did what?
Yeah.
Mr. Passive
Well, yeah,
SMH.
Mr. Passive.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the story. So that goes. So, Icarus is Benelos, Farlan is Veles. Fabius is Qatar. Harrion is Aindret. Blah, 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 blah. What am I doing? On your turn, as a bonus action, you can change Smother Spark to its alternate form if you choose. As Smother, it adds 2d8 necrotic damage to any hit. As Spark, it adds 2d8 radiant damage.
God, if you understood TikTok memes, I would be making one about this session right now. Because this whole thing to do with Spider-Man, right? You know the theme when Miguel comes on screen that plays. Okay, that music is in the background, and it's always like I can't interfere because it's a canon event, and it's him standing by and doing nothing. He cannot interfere. It is a canon event.
Well, yeah, canon event.
It is. It literally is.
Well, yeah, there you go. So I, in particular, wanted to record this one because I know that there's a lot of visual stuff that's going to be very difficult for me to write down afterwards. So this is why I wanted to broach the subject with you all about it now. So that David's
I'm glad
got
you did
all to
though,
watch again.
because I also want to listen to it again. To be fair.
All right, fair enough. Yeah, I mean it's pretty good shit. It's pretty good shit. Some lore for all of you.
The Lord. I wish we could have recorded that first session now, because that was sick.
Yeah. What's it? So that, I guess, was the boon that you got from Hestia. And now you've just got to find Gravar. Her boon was telling you all the shit that you didn't know. I knew that I had a lot of stuff to talk to you all about and explain and describe, and that I was probably going to end up going over time if I did do all of it that I needed to. But I was going to have like a whole thing at the beginning with her saying, so did you like go to the library? No? Did you like go to the scrying pools? No? You didn't go into the Wizards College and read anything there? No, the Bards College. You didn't read anything there either. So there's like a bunch of fucking like knowledge-seeking places that you could easily go and read shit, and you chose instead to run around in the open, chased by zombies. That was what you did? Wow, really? That's great. But that was more from the DM than it was the character, so I thought I'd be more true to Hestia and not just be a bitch. Like I am.
We're like knowledge. No.
Like I am. Oh God.
Knowledge?
I kind
No,
of
thank
no.
you.
I-
We'll
you know,
stand around
I
until
love
someone
how-
feeds it to us on a plate, please.
That's as bad as remembering it anyway.
Right, well,
I have the knowledge. It's here.
I'm gonna stop recording now. So, do we all want to say goodbye to David as he's probably finishing the recording? Bye, David.
Sorry to David.
Hope you enjoyed the recording.